20. And this is an audio video recorded meeting. Can I get a approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
everybody say aye.
Aye.
And actually I need to call someone for that. Sorry. Can I get, we'd say who else here, what members are here? Nobody?
Peter Kaiser.
Christie Kickham, Howard Matz.
John Kitchener.
And members of the public, we got Sue Carmel for staff. And Art, you on there?
You're a little hard to hear, Jill, so he might not have heard you.
Oh, okay, Art, are you joining us today?
He's muted. Huh?
He was
There
there.
you go.
There you go.
Hi, Art, we just wanted to make sure that was you here.
Yes,
Okay, great. It's just for the record, it's just for the minutes, sorry.
yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, do we have any public comment? I guess not, and seeing we don't, let's just open it up to the Rorys, so I want to see if everyone was able to go through their Rorys, and if they're happy with them, if they're not happy with them, if there's something they wanted to talk about, this is the time, which I always wanted to do that before, so I'm kind of excited to hear what you all want to talk about. I want to, the way I go through my Rorys is I get on the website, I hit Rorys, they pop up, and that's how I go through mine. So, like, my first one is Matic at Long Pond Hardening, and then I go from there. Is that the order you guys want to go in? Or do you, if I'm fine if you all just want to bring up the ones you want to do. I don't need to read all these. I don't want to do that. I don't think we need to do that.
I got a question for Sue, maybe. Sue, I think I've completed maybe 98%, or a little less, but
She can tell you.
there's a few I couldn't find, which was the Massasoit Bridge redesign, and then the Wawanett Road multi-use path. I couldn't find those two in my Rorys.
But we did the path last
Hold on one sec.
Oh, not that one then, sorry.
Were you thinking
Well, I don't think those are this year's.
year. This one,
multi-use path?
No, I accidentally
Wrong
highlighted that one.
wrong year.
Yeah,
That's what
oh yeah, don't worry about it. I did get them.
you're not.
I can look to see what you missed, if any.
Okay.
yes, Sue, do you know who's this, do you want to email each person if there are some they missed?
Yeah, that'd be
Email them
great.
Which ones?
That'd be big help.
That would be great. Okay.
I don't have any commentary on, I did go through and sort of note some that I thought that, I know we talked about maybe what you're maybe if there's any that you fully support, to note if there's any that you that are on the bottom end of your sort of selection process. If we are tasked with cutting, and so I've kind of gone through and done that, but I don't know how that aligns with how anyone else did it.
One question I have, Sue, is what if a lot of these rank so that they all go into the 50% and up? Then do we have to change that to be more like 60% and up to
So-
whittle it down to a certain amount of money?
So I don't think there was that kind of cutoff though. So I think, and to your question too, so I believe we take the average score of all the scores. And then I think we do a plus or minus one standard deviation
Yeah.
from that score.
Yeah.
So every year it's a moving
That is
range.
correct, that's what it
Yeah.
was.
So every year it's a moving range, so it's not necessarily 50.
I thought it was sort of, he was at 50.
Yeah, and I don't know what it was last year, but I think it was like, the average was 61, so it was like a 56 to,
Gotcha, okay.
66 or whatever.
Right,
But
So everybody want to do that again this year?
Well, that's the right way to do it.
I think so, yeah, but to Christie's point, so we won't know which ones.
True.
Based on our individual score, are inside or outside of what that range is. And obviously, if you have one that's below 30 and that you support, it's probably gonna be outside of that range, and then we can speak on it once we know the range and the ones that are gonna be outside of the bucket, so to speak.
It's possible that, that my Rory might reflect that I've supported it. But I actually, it doesn't, I supported it, but in the scheme of the big picture, I don't really approve it,
I know, that happens.
that
to me
makes sense.
sometimes, actually.
you know.
But so, and I
Which is
think,
why we gotta, I think next year maybe tweak some of the questions or the way it's, maybe all kind of more in agreement about what those questions mean, so we're kind of, there's more of a level.
I think instead of going and redefining the criteria, though, we typically have a discussion on ones that either are outside of it that we
True.
do as a group
True.
support and wanna put in the bucket.
Yeah.
Or ones that are in it
And we can always
that
do
we all say, this scored high based on what it's asking, but I don't necessarily think that it's, worthwhile to include in the bucket this year.
Yeah, I mean, then we should do that.
Well,
Yeah,
Peter,
exactly.
do you think it would be helpful if Sue was able, I don't know if she can, to give us the average score for each item for the group,
For
and-
each item, each request.
each request,
Okay.
and put next to it what you scored it as? If you find that helpful, then I think we could kind of go down through it and look at them, and you could see, oh, I scored that really low, but look how high that scored,
You
or
mean
I
like
scored it.
individually, so like
Or
report
so
to
it
me
brings
that
to
has the
your
average.
attention.
Yeah.
Why it's not consistent
Yeah.
with what you were thinking, so you could talk about it.
And I mean, as I'm sure you could, you could, if she has one that has a spreadsheet that has the average and everybody's individual, it'd be pretty easy to chop that up into 7 separate sheets and then send it out.
Right, do you have that, Sue?
Yeah, Sue, are you?
That's
Well,
the question. if
I
you can
did
get the
finish some
individual.
today, so,
Well, not, she doesn't have it today.
no, I finished, yeah, I finished some of mine today, but.
The question is whether or not she has the ability
Can
to
we hear
replace
Sue?
that.
Yeah, I get you.
So,
I can show you the report that Plum gives to me. I can show it on the screen if you want to see it quickly. It will show you each other's scores if you're all right with that.
Could you just show us what we could expect? By looking at yours?
Hold on, give me a minute and I'm gonna share screen. Oh, of course I have hundreds.
We have, we've seen them,
I don't.
But
Yeah.
everybody's individual scores on one
But it
place?
doesn't really matter.
No, I just think that there was some limitation that.
Can you
the
make it a little
software
bit bigger?
had. Okay, so yeah, that is pretty
Can you
much.
make it bigger?
Here's-
I can't, sorry, I can't read.
Oops,
So what does that tell us?
So if you scroll to the left, yeah, so that's request by request. It has a rundown of each member and how they ranked each of the categories. So essentially, that's what you're looking for. This just aggregates it. Every request with every member included.
Do you have the average of the group also?
right there. Well, I don't know what's,
For that.
that's your score. There's the Rory score of that
For each
project.
request?
Interesting.
However, there are 2 people that are in draft, so I don't know if that's calculating that into those being in draft, that
I don't think it's a worthwhile exercise to go through every
Not-
single
Neither do I.
one
And not
and
to-
then
not today.
pick apart,
And-
who disagrees and agrees.
I think we should look at them individual, go home, look at it and
I mean-
decide which ones you want to talk about.
Yeah.
so to that point, Sue can put on everybody's thing, something called reports, and that's there. Well, I'm telling everybody. So, I mean, I've had this for a month, on my, so I can see where, not just to look at anybody else's,
Mhm.
but just to see which ones have I done or not. Because I found myself trying to figure out which ones I'd done and which ones I hadn't. So, I mean, if we're gonna, I don't see why there's nothing secret
Yeah,
about
it's
it.
not.
No,
Just
not
just
public.
put it on
And it's what-
everybody's,
And it's not
Look what
about
Karen-
influence
yeah.
anybody
No.
else at all. It's not. it's
but I
not-
have a,
And
Okay,
yeah.
it's about discussing it
Yeah.
among, as a
Yeah.
group to decide, so we have a consensus among us
Yeah.
as to how the results came out.
so Sue,
Yes.
can we put reports easily on
Sure.
everybody's? I mean, we didn't. I think,
yes.
Don't necessarily
This is
need
the
to
only
get
report you're gonna get.
opinion on the request.
No, not at all, or maybe so.
Well, it could, but I don't
Why
think
not?
that I don't think the exercise is saying, 4 of the 6 people scored this high and 2 scored it low, so we need to figure out how to.
No,
No.
the point is
Convince-
that you, in that circumstance, you scored it low and you saw how other people scored it.
Exactly, yeah.
And you were just want to rethink that, or you were way higher than everybody else because
Yeah.
you were really an advocate of it and nobody else seemed to think it was as important as
And
you.
it's not trying to.
he's not wrong.
It's not
No,
trying to.
he should talk to
exactly.
the group about why he thought it was
Yeah,
important.
I agree.
well, But Madam Chair, yeah,
Or if he's asked to, I mean, obviously, if you scored it low, you did it for a reason, if I scored it high, I did it for a reason, if somebody says, why
through
do you do
the,
that?
through the chair, guys, Madam Chair. So we can do that, but what I thought we were gonna do is I've been through mine, I've done them, I'm confident of what I was doing and how I feel about it.
Mhm.
I've got a couple that I think are worthy of discussion. My two that I have, and I'm sure everybody, but that's what I thought we were gonna do was
That's what I was gonna do.
that
too.
we
That
were
was
gonna
my
come
plan.
back and say, okay, so
Right.
Christie has
Agreed,
got,
today.
you
I
know,
need to look at
he
everything,
feels he
but
wants to talk about these three or
I
whatever.
feel like I need to look at.
No, I don't,
Personally, like,
yeah,
Will went through it and we
Yeah,
have.
I
ours.
mean, if it means looking at it for the sake of our discussion and comparing, so we can have a discussion on it,
Sure.
like I'm fine with
Yeah.
it.
So
But
why don't you, I think we should start with John telling us the
Yeah.
ones he wants to talk about, and then she can pull it up and say, oh, well, we're at 60%
Yeah.
or 40 or whatever. So if you
yeah,
tell her the number,
and, yeah,
and I think
okay,
that's kind of the way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
that's
gonna say,
fine.
And real quick, just to clarify, in the past, so I think this meeting is separate from a future meeting that we are anticipating to have where, and Sue's shaking her head, yes, where we have the average
Yeah.
on a spreadsheet, we have every
Right.
request,
And then
we
you
have
go
where
through
that,
them all.
and then we go through them all, and that's usually where somebody would say, well, I don't know how that's a 70 because I ranked it as a 40, and then that discussion organically happens without going
But,
request by request, looking at every single person.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But-
and so that's a later date, and I agree with John
yeah,
that
that's
this
what I
is,
wanted to everyone today, so they felt like they.
of
could
course,
put
ones
it
that
down
you
So that we
didn't know how to score.
Then we have our average and the standard deviation,
Mm-hmm.
and then personally, I really just wanna stick to that. I don't wanna
Yeah.
like go
Yep.
back and look at something we all ranked at a 10 or 20 or 30,
Yeah.
I just think it's a waste of time. But unless it's an individual, but now's the time to bring up the one that you're maybe one you're worried about, maybe you think we've all ranked it bad and you wanna give it a boost, or, I did that last year, I really went to bat, I think, for the fields money and stuff, so that's fine, and, for the Jetties tennis courts.
yeah, yeah.
So it's fine if you all have something that.
all
you
right,
think-
do you want me to?
Who could
No,
forget that?
I'm good.
Yeah, let's say John first.
Okay, so the first one is very quick.
What's the
So-
number?
Well, it's our island home.
Yeah.
So, and the only reason I'm bringing it up.
That's on my list.
It's on my list
Yeah.
too, John. That's
So,
Well,
I
do you
don't-
wanna wait for Dawn for that? She says she's coming. Do you wanna wait? I'm gonna give her-
We can wait for her, if that's all
well, we
right.
can, but my comment is very simple,
Okay.
is that I don't think it's gonna matter what we think, because there is such a
Yeah.
big focus on this from a much
Mhm.
broader group of folks, that this isn't, our process is interesting, but not really critical to the process. So I'm not really gonna talk about that, but the other big one that I
Wait,
do,
can we just talk about it though, because I.
Okay.
wanna bring it up.
Okay.
I think personally, we should make a comment on the report about it. I know it might not matter, but I don't think it's a bad thing to say. We ranked it low and it didn't, we realize we don't. have to
Yeah, I know you're right.
realize what's going, but I think it's a bad thing to have a line in there to say this is something we were uncomfortable with or uneasy with. I don't know what the right word is yet, but.
All
and
right, so
we
I'll
didn't
finish-
Vote to put
Yeah.
it forward, maybe. I mean,
So I'll
that's the sense I'm getting from all of us, that we ranked it low. I don't know.
So I'll finish my comment then on it, which was only that, this is a huge amount of money and it's gonna sound callous, and that's why I'm hesitating, for 50 people. And in a year where we have so much on our plate financially, I don't personally feel that I can support that kind of money for something that's gonna really benefit a very small number of people.
Well, what's the first, like, they have their committee, right, and then they will feedback in the process with the town administration, but we're the first ones who are outside of that
Okay.
committee that look at it, and so I was just
Are you
feeling
you
that
still talking airport housing?
it'd be
No, I'm talking
okay
about
if we have a
all of them,
comment that
Oh,
if we were all on the same page. If we're not on the same page, I don't think we need to have it.
Well, the thing is though, that comment, probably reflects a lot of the public too. We're not just,
Well, that's what
we're
I
not
wanted
just
to
this
say
many
about it.
people against the whole island. There's a
Yes.
lot of people that feel this way too.
Yeah, that's
You
why I
know,
thought we should do it, because we're like the first ones. and
Okay,
then our-
you're right.
our report goes to
You
some
know-
board and the finance committee, and hopefully they look at it and then, you know, if they wanna amplify that or not, that's fine, but I don't think we should. Some of these things just get siloed and they're never really discussed, and I think it's good feedback for us to give the select board and the finance committee.
Another point I'd like to raise, which I hate to say this, but the airport housing is is paid from the airport enterprise fund. So it really doesn't become a general fund issue because it's all paid back by, I believe, by operating revenues that are excess for any year.
Correct.
And if that's the case, then while we all agree it's expensive, we need to keep that in mind that they're wasting enterprise money that otherwise might come to the general fund. You can take money out of the enterprise fund and move it to the general fund.
I have a different view to that though, and that is, I don't think that is true when you talk about the buckets, but I don't think for me, I think it's deserving of a comment that $6 million
Oh, yeah.
for 2 dwelling units in 1 duplex is ridiculous. It's out of line with everything else that the town is doing in affordable housing. And this needs to go under the microscope before this ever gets approved.
I didn't
Because-
mean to imply otherwise.
Okay.
That's why I said, I'm sorry to bring this up, but I totally agree with you.
And-
It's
and I
just-
would-
It's just
Yeah,
wrong.
I'd finish my comment by saying, you know, for 2.25 million, you can buy nice homes in Middle Island. So why would we spend 6 million for the Taj Mahal of duplex units when we can get perfectly good housing for a lot less money, ready to go?
Thank you. Christie?
I was just gonna say, we should keep a tally of those particular requests that would benefit from a comment.
Well, I think we know what they are. I mean, to me, it's the Arlen Home, it's the airport, it's town employee housing, because those are the ones that are gonna go on the ballot most likely.
But there might, in discussion, we might have one that is controversial among us, but not significant in the scheme of things. I just think it'd be good to have just a tally. We don't have to worry about it now.
So the
Oh,
first,
good, all right,
so the first 2
All right.
would be on the
Scroll-
tally list
the
then?
scroll keeper.
Christie?
That would be good.
The first 2 would be on would be on that list?
Yeah, Arlen Home and
Yeah.
airport.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But then, to me, the town employee housing should be on the list. Now, I know Christie sent us they wanna drill down on a weight drive now. We just got that on the email
Yeah.
this afternoon, so you might not have had a chance to
Was
look.
that Wade or was that Tacoma?
Well, it looked like it was weight.
Oh.
It was gonna be Tacoma, now they shifted to 5 units on weight.
do you think, Madam Chair, we should continue with that process we were doing where each one of us was gonna say,
Yes, but I'm piggybacking on it only
Okay.
because to me, these things tie together. So
Okay.
I fly at 30,000 feet, but to me, the airport housing and the town employee housing are a little bit enmeshed for me in the way I look at it.
oh, for sure,
Because if the airport is able to house police and fire, then I feel like there is an opportunity there for the town to consider town employee housing money for that the HTA can't do that. And I don't even know if that's possible, but that's why they're kind of, you know, floating in my mind about, potentially coming together, or is there a collaboration there? You know, the town employee housing didn't have a plan before, we just got that today.
You know what? I think that's another good point for a footnote. This collaboration of housing design and cost.
yeah. Good.
Right, a lot of
design.
stuff is in isolation, and some of that is just because of the way the structure of the trust works. The town has more flexibility, right, to house people, with
Right.
all backgrounds, if they don't have those streets attached that the trust has.
And the other point
That's
that,
why they're coming, and they need employee housing, I know they do.
Yeah.
But if there could be identified housing, I just don't know if the airport can do that. I know Art's on, I don't know if you wanna comment about that, Art.
I'd be happy to, Madam Chair. Just briefly to Mr. Kitchener's comment, the airport cannot just go out and buy a different house, given the grant assurances. And I think we've been over that, and we've provided the supporting documentation of that. We spent years obtaining special permission from the FAA to be able to construct housing on airport-owned land. The FAA simply just doesn't allow for that use of airport revenue. So it's really not on the table for us. And we do agree, just like you do, that it is expensive in terms of the per unit cost. But I think we've also presented that we're trying to, do this as efficiently as possible, come in as low as we can, and have a number that we don't have to fall short and come back to you yet again, as we found over the years. So I think that there's a bit of extra baked into that number. Hard to say exactly what that is. We'll follow all proper procurement processes. We will, seek competitive bids, estimates from contractors, and do the project as efficiently as possible. We're just like every other essentially, employer on the island. We're in a dire situation of that. If we don't provide some level of housing, then we're not able to attract and retain the required employees. And I think that, we probably don't need to go too in depth on that. And then to Ms. Fee's comments about can we use it for other town employees, the determination was, as I understand it, that it had to be first responders or otherwise providing, support services to the airport. So, exactly how that interpretation would be made. My belief would be that, be pretty clear cut if it was law enforcement, the airport has, agreements where we provide and pay for, services from Nantucket Police Department to be on duty as needed at the airport, regular basis while we have scheduled commercial flights. And then of course, firefighters, EMTs, I would think any of those type of folks would qualify based on my understanding. So the idea is certainly that no units would go unfilled, unused. It's also why we originally had more of a build out for more housing units on this particular property. And we've honestly hauled that back to sort of just try to meet a demand. And I think I touched on this last time, sort of a housing production plan, if you will, the dorm for the seasonal, couple townhouses that might work mid-management, and then hopefully work to rehab once we get the current seasonals out of the Thompson House in Matacasham. We could possibly develop a manager's house there, and I hope at that point that the airport's done, with housing, and then the other parts could fall under the free market, if you will, or some sort of other arrangement. But I understand the concern with the cost, and I just want to, tell you that we are following all procurement processes. We're not, I don't like the label Taj Mahal. I mean, these are not, Corian and, platinum faucets. I mean, this is pretty straightforward type modular housing. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, but
Can I respond to
Yeah.
that first? So I hear you about that, and I guess my question is, if first responders can't be there, and we know that there's a need in the island for first responders to have housing. I mean, one of the problems with the trust is they can't do targeted housing for employees. They have to open that up to other people. They have to go through a lottery system, and this to me seems like an opportunity. You have spent a lot of money on the infrastructure going in, and you have the land, it's cleared. I assume the FAA gave you permission for the entire 5 acres. If not, I just don't know what that was.
Joe,
The 1 acre or
that's my
5?
question.
But that, I'd like to get to the bottom of that, and to me, it just seems like an opportunity. Maybe you didn't ask for enough money, is what I'm wondering. You see
Well,
what-
I mean, we have to pay for it. That's part, just back to your other point on sort of, yes, this is enterprise fund. We still have to have, there is room for more housing units. But this, I think regardless of that, it needs to be a phased approach. And that's what we're trying to do, is take this on a metered, and we have to manage it, of course, being all of the procurement and then the construction contracts. So let's try to take it a step at a time, and maybe we're back having another discussion in a couple of years, because there is available land, and maybe there is some other, need or way that could happen. But I think we have to still take this in steps. I don't think we could come to you and say, I don't think the airport could fund, say, you know, 8 duplexes, if you will, at this number. And so I think we're just taking the bite of the apple that we can right now and trying
I
to,
understand how you're facing it, I get that. I'm wondering, like, can the town, can that get approved at town meeting for town employee housing to be built on that land?
Could I just interrupt? Because I want to ask the question specifically. You are relying on what they have orally told you as the FAA restrictions and what their own interpretation is, their understanding of what it is. That's not okay. We need to see the FAA documentation that specifically details what it is that the restrictions are for the use of that property. And whoever gave a legal opinion or interpretation, we need to see that document too, in order for us to feel comfortable that that in fact is the limitation of it.
no problem. I mean, we provided all that last year. You guys have it, but we'll get it to you again. I mean, really, it's
The
there.
other thing that what is important is there's a lot of housing going on this island for employee housing. And I'd like to see the airport benchmark their housing costs against the other housing that's being developed by the other groups on the island.
I'll do
For me,
that
that's a
now.
critical
We're
point.
cheaper.
We don't see that, no.
You don't see the full cost of construction. You see one piece.
No,
You
we
don't-
want to, we do want to see the one piece in the context of the full construction cost, of course. So
I'm
if
working on
that's
that
what
now.
we're
I'll
missing-
have it for you in a couple days.
So if we're missing it, then maybe we should see it. Maybe you should be sharing with us why it is that this is in fact not more expensive than housing of other parties on the island.
That's great. I'm doing that, but there's a responsibility for other town departments to represent their own projects to you. It's hard for me to have to pull all of this data for you when you should be talking to other town departments about it.
Well, no, I think you're smarter, and I think that you probably can pull it together for us because you know what to do.
Yeah, well,
But
I have
we can
other
get
things on my
Christie to-
schedule and an airport to run as well.
Yeah, I totally understand. Let's get the paperwork for that day. I think I have seen a letter, but I haven't ever seen interpretation. from
I
town
never
council
saw,
about
I
what
don't
that meant.
remember the letter, so, because I'm old, and so maybe I should see it
Do you
again.
remember that? Some years ago?
I don't, at least nothing that substantial, but if they said they sent it, there should be a record of it, and they could probably forward it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back years, back to even Tom, Rafter providing this. So certainly there's been, rollover on this. It had to do with the funding of all the dormitory, these questions were answered, but sure, it's out there. I mean, this isn't just subjective on the airport's part. It's, the grant assurances and the
Well,
requirements. We spend a lot of time on this. And we have to remain compliant with the FAA and the grant assurances. So we'll get that to you.
Yeah, no one's saying you don't. I feel like there's just, I heard something different this year, Art, that I hadn't heard before, so that's probably why I got focused on it. In the past, I heard that it had to be an airport employee, and this year I felt like I heard it could be someone from the police force or the fire department, since they do provide essential services to you. And I hadn't heard that before.
All right. I think that's been consistent, but okay.
Madam Chair, may I have a question to Art? Art, it's John. I'd like to make a suggestion and see if you would agree to this. So I'm back to the benchmarking of this particular unit, just put a box around that. And I would suggest that rather than Noah have to take this on his own, that Noah, Christy Ferrantella, and Tucker Holland, the three of them, work together to benchmark what you're planning to do at the airport with that duplex unit. Have them benchmark that against what it's cost for some of the units. That, for example, there's a triplex as part of the Our Highland Home plan. There's a cost for that.
Yeah.
But rather than get into it, to have those three, whatever they come up with, I think we could trust that, yes, everybody's point of view has been considered. But if we don't do that.
It's in the works. I've already
Yeah, but
seen the
but
emails.
The point is, I think it needs to be Tucker Holland because of his experience. No, and this isn't about, this is a benchmarking.
I
So-
hear you, he doesn't work for the town anymore, so I hear you that he has knowledge. That they could seek out his input from someone if they wanted to, but.
Well,
they don't-
Art, how would you feel about Tucker being consulted by the other two?
Well, I know that
let-
Noah's already working with Christie. I'm not sure how you pull in someone that's not a town employee anymore,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't want to see us get just spun around.
I
Yeah,
agree,
I
or
agree
we're
with
not
that.
trying to send you down rabbit
I'm
trail,
fine
we're
with
getting later in the process, and as you heard me say, it's not so much for me about this project. It used to be for me that was expensive, but it really turned into me that this was more of an opportunity to do some collaboration. We're looking at some big numbers for housing here, and you have land, so that's my side of it. And, you know, if we can see some better numbers, I think it would be really encouraging, so Chrissy?
I'm trying to wrap this around my head here. If there was is there, I know that Howard's requested maybe some documentation to sort of put some parameters to what the FAA requirements are and what they have what they've granted you as far as being able to put housing in on airport property, which we understand is a rare occurrence. Do you have an understanding? Do you guys have a is there a sunset that you know of? Just before that, is there a sunset on this sort of this grant from the airport or FAA to allow housing? Like, are we up against some time parameters? And then money aside, I do want to mention, I know that, you know, in a previous meeting, Noah did mention, you know, what we don't understand really is the sensitivity between the FAA and Nantucket Airport, as far as what are the parameters of what the conditions are. But I know that Noah had mentioned, you know, they don't want to get into the business of having housing. And I certainly don't think that the town, even though related to the airport, can do a project on airport land if the airport itself has been granted a very rare waiver to allow land building on the airport property. I'm verbalizing that. Obviously, Noah, we have a huge problem with the cost. As you know, that's no surprise. And I think the project itself, obviously, we all try to find some room when it comes to housing. But, you know, obviously the cost is really has been holding us up a little bit. But I am, you know, sympathetic to what the airport needs are. I don't want to displace airport employees, specific airport employees with public safety for housing, you know. And I know we're just talking about what are the other opportunities on the property. I don't need to see that just yet, but I do think it's something that, as Jill mentioned, is certainly something to you know, look into. But it's just a few comments. Is there a sunset clause on the waiver granted from the airport?
I can answer that. FAA authority, both financial and regulatory, derives from sort of the biannual FAA Reauthorization Act. So every 2 years, the Authorization Act contains statutory provisions that can be specific and prescriptive to different FAA policy items. The gaps are filled in by internal rulemaking. So you have both sort of congressionally directed programs on a biannual basis, which could impact FAA interpretations, and you have agency rulemaking that is ongoing. One of those items that came out of the new FAA Reauthorization Act that is, you know, not potentially in our favor for getting housing done is, you know, how the airport approves some uses. I think it's I can't remember the exact code, but I think it's you know, a Part 61 or a Chapter 31 land use approval issue. So no, we don't have a sort of get out of jail free card. You know, we're subject to a federal agency that has, you know, responds to what Congress directs it to do. You know, the observation that I want to make here is, look, I think the world of Tucker. I know him really well. He went to my alma mater. I think the world of Christy. She's also very busy and working hard, and I'm communicating with her. I talked to Brian Turbot. I talked to Libby Gibson at sort of a department head level. You know, Capcom, to me, for what it's worth, you're trying to direct a town-wide housing effort, but I don't know where it's coming from because I'm not getting this feedback, and other department heads aren't getting this feedback. We all have our very unique needs and our very unique strengths and challenges that we use to solve our housing issues. And as I'm going to write to you in a couple days, this is why project comparisons don't work really well. You might see $6 million as a construction cost from one particular housing project, but the OPM fee would have come from somewhere else. The design fee would have come from somewhere else. So you're not accounting for those costs. And the information I'm going to give you, it might bother you. And I might upset other departments. I don't appreciate being put in that role just to defend my airport project. You know, we're dithering around. I have 2 employees who have 6 weeks left in their current housing, and then they're probably moving off island. And I'm searching for 2 more employees. I could have had this project done 5 years ago, probably at a lot less money. I am not at all encouraged that I still have to make the same representations year after year. I mean, if you need me to have a legal opinion for you, it's going to be the same policy document that I've provided to you 2 or 3 years in a row, or that the manager has provided for you 2 and 3 years in a row. If this helps you make your decision in favor of the airport's project, I'll spend $2,000 with legal counsel and have it done. But this is getting really frustrating and really sort of over the horizon for what I think your role is and needs to be.
Ooh.
Could I just add to that? I think to just try to address Mr. Kickham's question about the grant, and just to clarify, this isn't a grant that was issued just for housing. This is all the grants, all the money that's ever been given to Nantucket Airport by the FAA. Every time you take money, actually, when I say take, when you accept funds from the FAA, then you must sign, 20 times for every sort of funding opportunity. And that goes back through all kinds of projects. And it essentially says that the airport will follow those rules for all of that money that's been granted to the airport. And it gets into revenue diversion. And so I just, hopefully that helps to clarify that it's not just a grant related to this. And specific to your question about the authorization related to the housing on the property, my understanding is there is no expiration of that, and that, we would be able to continue on the path. But I think that what we're really trying to do, to just reiterate and hopefully kind of take it to a focus on just this, is provide housing for these couple of units. And then to Ms. Veith's point, with respect to opportunities for other supporting agencies, I think it would have to, we can talk about that after these are built. If we continue on and we see a demand for airport housing that is needed, and then if there was a situation where those weren't filled, then perhaps they could be used for that. I think I would have concern, and that I suspect council would have concern, if we were to say we were building these dedicated to non-airport personnel. But again, I think if they were dedicated to that personnel and then there was not a demand or a need, that would be a different discussion. But it's sort of down the road at this point. Look at the money that we're talking about right now. We have to, just like you're worried about how much it costs, so are we at the airport level. And that's why that we're not doing sort of the full build out, and we're just trying to get a couple of units to, provide some stability, which I hope you could appreciate. And for an overall fiscal policy, if we have to start getting into, rent and subsidies, then and spending money in that direction, I would think that that's a less desirable outcome or financial sort of policy for both the airport and the town in general, when in fact we have the land and we could use the capital instead or the funds instead, to create, actual owned homes, and have the money go back into that. So thank you for your time. I hope you understand that point.
Well, okay, yeah, I don't want to get into a housing discussion right now, actually, about everybody, like the whole island and how certain things work, but I appreciate that, Art, I do. Anybody else have any questions?
Not right now.
And no, I'm not asking you to go and like, spend all these extra hours comparing it. I think we just wanted to see it a little bit finer. There weren't a lot of details on it just seemed like a lot on our spreadsheet, the breakdown. That seems, like the site work seemed really high, and
Also,
I think that was one of my big questions, the site work actually, so.
Yeah.
Christine.
also, just to put it in perspective, no, you're right. We're strictly advisory.
Yeah.
But we're advisory, but we are also responsible to answer questions from the select board, from the finance committee, and ultimately from, the town people at town meeting, if it was to come up. So just kind of know that's where that's where we're coming from. I've often been a proponent of housing and airport housing, and I'm certainly working through it, but I just wanted to put sort of our committee responsibility, just sort of mention that, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, I'll elaborate on that. I mean, even if we aren't comfortable with the project and we don't give it a recommendation, that doesn't stop it dead in the water. I mean, if the island feels like it's a very worthwhile project, the select board does, they can overrule our recommendation. So, if we ask questions that are within the purview of our organization for our ability to answer questions to people that we see on the street or at town meeting or anywhere else, that gives us the ammo that we need to show that we're doing our due diligence. But at the end of the day, we aren't the organization that would stop something like this dead in the tracks. So
I agree.
we might have our views and our opinions and our recommendations, but it only goes so far.
I agree.
Just to that, if I may, very briefly, Madam Chair, I completely appreciate that, but I value your recommendation and your opinion. That's why we spent the time coming here, trying to answer the questions, and I'm hoping that we could really get your support, whether it's, on an advisory level. I think you guys do great work. I follow this along, and that's what we're really trying to do. I hope that we can answer your questions and ultimately gain your support for this much needed project. Thank you.
Thanks, Art.
That's hard.
Yep.
And thanks for, responding to all of our requests. We know it seemed like a lot, but it's, it's been multiple years, so it's not a total surprise. And we have 62 other projects to look at too, so you're not the only one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, do you all have any other breweries that you wanted to bring up?
For art or?
No, just other on our
No,
list.
for us.
On our list of
Oh,
ones
yeah.
that we
I think you-
came up with questions in as we were trying to complete them.
Yeah, so like
Yeah.
okay, so, yeah, my next one was, the DPW,
Yeah.
80 million. And, especially given the collision projects that we know we've got for fiscal year 26.
Sorry, John, did you say collision?
Yeah.
Just the big,
Yeah, the big.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So for this one, I'm uncomfortable with moving this one forward in fiscal year 26. In that, the risk of leaving it in its current location, I get it. But that's not an exact science. So I guess I would be more of, okay, we should make sure that that land is there should we ever need it for this purpose. We perhaps should do the design work, some of that. But I would personally like to see the construction of this moved off until later years, until we are more certain that we really do have to move this. And I understand that balance is a tricky one, understanding when that is, but I'm not so sure that we're at the point now where we have to pull the trigger to actually build this thing, that we sort of get it ready, but not pull the trigger on it a later year.
Howard, I'm sure you definitely have to have a comment about
I don't.
what?
That's not. I agree with him,
Okay,
but I'd like to see, I really would like to see it happen, but it's a lot of money. I mean, there's a huge amount of capital expenditure, so let's see how it comes out in the scoring and then make a determination.
So you don't want to, you want to finish the meeting? I was just saying, you're like, let's see how this, like, we can't do anything until the scoring comes out.
today's,
Well, I think that,
you wanna pull that one?
Jill,
up?
I got a comment.
Maybe not everybody scored it, but the DPW building. Do anything?
I think it's really important, but I just.
Do?
I guess maybe for you guys while she's doing that. So let's say it doesn't go in this
Can you
fiscal
pull
year.
up what-
80
did I
million
just
next
for the
fiscal year.
DPW building.
Or the year after, or
Or,
the year after.
but so is that really gonna solve this collision problem if it's in fiscal 26
No.
instead of fiscal 27
It's
instead of
not.
26, right? So
That's why your point
Did
is a really good
everybody-
point.
So that's what I'm kind of
Wait,
wondering.
That's why I
wait,
think we
wait,
need to discuss it.
Could you pull up the score that we
We've-
have for the DPW building?
Yeah,
Did everybody score that?
no, one individual has not.
Okay,
Who is that?
you?
No,
Or
it
you?
it is not Christie.
Okay, that's all right. So what is our score? Just tell us. You don't.
It is 53.5% right now.
Right on the lower bound.
Well, that usually about makes it though.
Oh, I mean, yeah, look, we'd have to see, but it's right around there.
When they said
it's not-
50, I'm like, oh, I gave it approval.
Yeah.
I didn't like that. I
Not
gotta
70, it's not 20, it's,
Yeah.
right on the edge.
Yeah, well, I think that shows something.
Yeah.
I think that's a good
Same.
indication. I think that's reflecting almost what you
Yeah.
just said.
And what you said.
Christie, go ahead.
Just for discussion, we're discussing, right?
Yeah.
I do respectfully, fully disagree. And I see what your points are. My thing is this, if we approve this now, it's not gonna be realized for another 4 years. My only reservation about this is the location. And I know they've really settled on it. I really liked Sun Island Road.
But they're not gonna change that here.
No, I know, I know.
Fortunately.
But,
We'll get it-
I know what's gonna
they couldn't work
happen.
that out with the airport, right?
pardon?
They couldn't work that out with the airport, is that why? you know?
Sun Island.
I don't know, maybe, yeah. But I'm looking at, well, I know for a fact, we all know, every year that we wait, I can't imagine what an $80 million or whatever project's gonna increase in annually. With that said, I'm also, there's a little component of coastal resiliency. And I know that area could be affected. And with a lot of these requests, especially these long-term requests, I try to think of my decision not based on now or 3 years. I try to think, what's my stewardship for 10 years down the road and 20 years down the road when this committee is sitting here and saying, geez, I'm glad we did that. It's possible they say, we shouldn't have done that. So I understand it goes both ways, and I respect that and understand that. I think that,
That's a good question. I hope we put that
Yeah.
actually in our report.
Yeah.
I really like these.
and I think that I do think that, the DPW's been at it for a while, been at it for a while to where they have done their due diligence. I think that we have impacted that particular area enough with the landfills, with just traffic, with the buildings, with everything. I think the time that the town is taking over responsibility is a good time for a new start in a new location that is efficient, safe, is not affecting environment, is centrally located on the island. So, that's sort of my take on it, and I think that the other thing is in 6 years or 7 or 8 years, if we did this project, you could say this for the airport too. How are we gonna look back on what we spent on those projects? You know what I mean? We're gonna say, the money spent. We've got the benefit of a new facility. We have the benefit of housing wherever it may be, whatever housing we decide. Or we have the benefit of a storage facility for whether it's the, police station or DPW. Those benefits are basically just delayed. So I look at it, I look at these projects a certain way. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I appreciate that. I think
That's my 2 cents.
it's hard, no one gets excited.
I'm not a businessman, so I don't look at these and this is maybe a fault of mine. I look at these projects less as, and maybe I'm misconstruing what you guys are saying, but less as like a businesses wouldn't do this. This is listen, our Island Home, business wise,
Out of business.
yeah.
But Christie, it's not
But I
ours
know.
to make a decision, it's really the finance department and
I
Brian.
agree, Howard, this is for
and town.
discussion for a request.
But I
Yeah,
agree with
yeah,
you,
yeah.
but like, who are we to say that that the capital budget is over the top and where to cut it? That's
Well, I
not
agree,
our
that's,
job.
that usually comes up is when we are narrowing down what we're deciding on these in past years. We do consult with finance on what does this look like to the town? What are you looking at as far as borrowing? We getting good rate? Like, how many years out? What's the tax implication? Like, those are all, especially for these big ones, those are all questions that historically we've always asked. It's always weighed into what, how we look at it and how we ultimately think about that request.
So, Chrissy, so when you talk about, okay, what would the 80 million be if we delay it? What's the
Mhm.
escalation cost? The other side of that, though, is the cost of money and how much do we save by delaying the investment? And you have to think about that, because every year you put it off, you're not borrowing, so this is not,
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yep.
this is not the Brian is, if that's the question we want to ask.
He's not
Brian,
listening.
no, I don't mean now. I really don't mean now. I don't.
He had his hand
really.
up for 10 minutes.
He did.
No, I'm
No,
kidding.
no.
It was very
Because-
clear though.
No, because, because in the end, for me, it isn't about the cost of money and it isn't about the inflation cost. It's about, I'm not convinced that we really do need this in the near term. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
fair, yeah, fair.
so.
Can I give my color on this one? So, I mean, I just think with the development, the development on the island, the state of the infrastructure, roads, projects, everything else, and the state of the headquarters that the DPW has been operating with and currently the state that it's in, I don't see any reason to put this off. Personally, I mean, I think if 5 years from now, it took for them to have a state of the art, quote unquote, facility, I mean, it's $80 million, I'm sure it's gonna be, what they need, and I don't think they've had what they need for the last 10 years, 15 years to really operate effectively and efficiently, and and again, I know nothing about municipal finance, and I would leave it to Brian and the rest of his staff and Sue to say, we either can do this year, or we can't, and if they say we can't, then put it off. If they say we can, I'm not gonna say, well, that's great, but have you sure you haven't thought about whether or not we should wait a year or 2 or 3 to do it for financial reasons? But when it comes to operational purposes, the state of the facility, what the DPW is trying to do, and I mean, sincerely, what they haven't been able to do, with one of the primary reasons being the facilities that they're operating with, the equipment, the inability to source and retain staff, part of it being the facilities they're operating out of. That's a little bit more of a black and white question for me, and my answer is, they owe this based on the responsibilities and how integral they are to the island, especially more so in the last 5 and even less of 10 years. I don't see why pushing this off until we say, well, you know what, 5 years from now, the facility that they're in, the roof's gonna cave in and they're not gonna be able to do anything, so let's do it today. I think preemptively, if we can make it work, obviously it's been on the radar for a while. I mean, the coastal resiliency stuff, I don't think it's gonna be underwater next year. There
don't
is a
think so
dynamic
either.
to it,
Yeah.
but for me, it's more just giving them what they need to operate and do what they need to make Nantucket function the way that this island should, considering how much money the town spends, the residents spend, and everyone that comes here spends. That's it.
Yeah, as an example, there was a capital committee item that came through, which was the, Wanacummet Water's office space. Their old office was just, it was constant, it was constant maintenance. It was leaking, it was dingy, and this is a place where you have year-round and summer people going to drop off, you know. Yeah, their checks. And their request was, the financial request was a little item, not contentious, but it was an item among the members. That was maybe 6 years ago, 7 years
That was
ago.
the outgoing water commissioner that really wanted to
Yeah.
do it before he was.
Yeah, Bob Gardner.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It was his legacy.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was maybe, what?
6'9"? Not even?
No, I think it was like 3,
Yeah.
maybe 2.9 or 3.
Yeah.
But that's an example of, that building will be there in, within our lifetime, unless it burns down. We are done with that. That is we can cross that one off. That one is done. And, we did it at that much.
But the new harbor master building came to us too, and that did not, yeah, didn't it?
Was it new or was that just
It was a
raise it
rebuild.
up and
It was a rebuild. They
Yeah.
had to make it
Yeah,
a plan and they had to add the elevator.
you have the CRM stuff or CRP stuff down there?
And did that one just, I mean, I don't know whatever happened to that.
I think they pulled back because they didn't know what was ultimately gonna happen in the building with all the CRP recommendations.
Madam Chair, can I just
ahead.
continue the conversation with Kristen? So, because I do think, and you have to remember, this is my first year at this, so, but what, somewhere along the line in this whole capital budget process, something has to happen, and I'm not sure, and I'm gonna describe that in a second. I'm not sure whether it's here, and if you all say, no, it's not here, this is down the line when it gets to the finance committee. But some decisions are gonna have to be taken about, forget the detail. We're gonna have to take some decisions about what is most important. I'll give you my view of the world. Water and sewer are always gonna be at the very top of my list, because if one of those fails, every single person is affected on this island in a bad way the next day. So they'll always be at the top. And I actually think that both David and Mark, if you were to look out in more detail a few years out, they got some big expenses that we are not yet seeing on these forms. And that's not anybody's fault. Then you get to schools. And, you know, versus a new DPW, you know, how do you feel about this? Our sewer, how do you feel about our water? How do you feel about our schools? How do you feel about our natural resources, which this year are looking for 12 million. And I think last year they wanted 2. So it's a huge, huge increase. You know, it's not just somewhere along the line, we're going to have to say, this is more important than this. And that's where on my list, the DPW starts to come down the list. Because if I've got to invest some money, it's sewer, it's water, it's our kids. And I'd rather see our kids, you know, get what they need. And the DPW have a leaky roof for a while. And I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but somewhere along the line, I think that process has to happen. And perhaps it does. I just don't know whether it's here or not.
Yeah. So, I mean, the other, you know, the discussion is also, what do you want to present the public with? You know, what's your take on when you present, and actually, after my comment, I don't want to waste Brian's time, so I do want to ask him a question through you if I could. But, you know, there's going to be, I mean, the town has really made decisions to fund some really big items, whether it's schools, infrastructure, sewer expansion. And I think that, you
Our
know,
town manager is here.
I love that.
Perfect timing,
I love it.
perfect timing. Everybody's going. John has a couple quick questions.
Miss you too.
Yes, but I've got, believe it or not, I got a meeting in here.
Oh, well, okay.
Are we disturbing you?
Is this your new building that you're trying to take over now? Or we're talking about building
Trying
your
to
building?
take over, I already took it over.
We're renting from you.
Maybe you would.
Oh, well, no.
Yeah?
If I,
Maybe
I
check.
say, when we had a meeting here the other day, it was freezing.
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
Today,
Today,
t-shirt,
yeah.
I
And it
love-
got friendly outside.
tanked up.
I love this building, it's so convenient.
It is, it's
True.
good.
It is.
I love it.
Good to see you, Libby.
Okay, you too.
Yeah,
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Um, You know, just sitting on coastal resiliency has sort of, introduced me further to the, impending like high cost of projects. And we're gonna see some major dollar projects that are gonna be what you're talking about, affecting everyone. Significant.
Yep.
And I think that the closer we get to those, which we know is not gonna happen in 5, 10 years, maybe 15, maybe 30. But to do, say, this DPW project, the same time as we're closing in on those projects at a higher rate, to me is just, I'm just a little worried. I get worried about that. I guess, so I don't mind presenting, like advising to present these projects to the public. Like, I don't like I get,
Yeah.
I get stability, I get sort of keeping things like this. And I guess my question to Brian, if I could through you, was just when you have a big ticket item on the docket, how do you sort of process sort of the financing of it and presenting it to the public? And when you have more than one, how does a finance director process that?
Through you, Madam Chair. So that's a really good question. And not to give away any of my, yeah, well, I'm not sure, actually. Not to give away all of the secrets that are going to be in the presentation on November 20th, but I think a lot of those questions are going to be answered, Christie, when we
Yep.
give an update to the board, not only on 26 capital, the out years, but also there's a second presentation slide deck on, we're calling it a collision. I don't know if I necessarily think that's the greatest word to use, but
Good collision.
it kind of seems appropriate right now. There is kind of, I don't want to say a collision, there is a large, there's a fairly significant number of large dollar projects all seeming to come together all at once. And it's going to, like I said, without going into everything, I think that the crux of the presentation is going to be that the board is going to have to make some policy decisions on the direction of some of these projects and what we do with them. Because it is going to, in the general fund itself, it is going to, I don't want to say be difficult to manage. We'll be able to manage it because we do have substantial capacity to borrow, but it is going to cause an increase in the tax rate and the amount that people are going to be spending in the tax rate. So I think that the part of the presentation of the board is going to be, here's the list of potential debt exclusions in 26 for fiscal or 2025 ATM and STM. And here's the long list of potential debt exclusions for the out years. There's no years programmed with some of these projects in the out years, but here's this list, and they're both pretty exhaustive and extensive, and pretty eye-opening when you look at them. So it's not going to be easy to do. We typically try, and Sue and I have talked about this quite extensively because she has experience working with debt as well. We typically try to find a way to model this debt in as substantial portions of debt are coming off, but
All right.
as we add some of these larger projects, it's going to become a little bit more challenging to be able to accomplish that, quite honestly, which is why I think there's going to be some requirements from the board to prioritize the direction of the capital projects that are the high dollar ones. I would like to, Madam Chair, if it's okay, I understand the high dollar value of the DPW and how it may be a little bit shocking to some people, but right now, I just want to point out one thing. Construction costs are escalating at about anywhere between 3.5% and 4% a year right now. I know that there certainly is a delta between that escalation and what I'm saving in interest, but that facility has got to be under consideration for replacement because the new DPW director and the central fleet manager are doing an incredible job of getting the backlog of equipment and things purchased so that the staff and the town has the necessary equipment to perform those functions. And it's always been, in my 10 years here, it's always been an observation of the Capcom that we're leaving hundreds and hundreds, if not millions of dollars worth of equipment that we need to perform services in the town outside. And why are we doing that? And it is a consideration that I think is important because it's not only the building, but it's all of the equipment that we have right now that is sitting outside exposed to all of the elements. So I understand the price tag and I understand, but probably as well as anyone, what the next couple of years look like in terms of large scale projects and that cost. And like I said, on the 20th, we're going to take everybody through this. I think it's going to be eye-opening for people. I think you all have some understanding of it, getting to see the current year and the out years, but there's an awful lot of projects probably in the next 5 to 10 years. And it will not be easy to thread the needle to accomplish them all. And some of them will be pushed out and some of them may take a very long time, if ever, to come to fruition to do. But there's going to need to be some discussions and some choices made on how to prioritize these to if we're going to accomplish it.
Thank you.
Brian, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
I appreciate that a lot.
Very much.
Your input means a lot. It's hard for us to look at all of them because we're seeing them all at the same time, just like you are, and it seems overwhelming. I feel like you gotta pick winners and losers, but maybe it sounds like y'all are gonna change the timelines a little bit so that we don't really have to do that.
May I have a question to Brian?
Some of the timelines will change along the way after we present to the select board. I have no doubt that some of these will change a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
John has one question.
Yeah,
for you.
Brian, just a quick question. We're obviously focused on 26, but on the forms that we get, you can see some of the out years.
Sure.
This is only, I have to say, Brian, a gut feeling more than anything else, but I've sat down with Mark with water on the water piece, and then on the sewer, I haven't sat down with David, but it seems from the forms that when you say like 10 years out, it feels like water, for example, has an awful lot more capital requirements than we're seeing on the form for those out years. And I'm just wondering if you're seeing something perhaps different than we would need to see at this point for sewer and for water, because I do feel like those two are so critical to all of this that it's important that we really do know, as difficult as it might be to accept, we do need to know what their capital might be 5, 6, 7 years out.
So that's a really great question. I think there may be some water projects that are not necessarily seen in the out year plans, only because in prior years there has been allocations for water distribution extensions and improvements that had a general vicinity of where they were going to go. So there has been some allocations in prior annual town meetings. So they do have available funding to begin work as they develop the plans for extensions. So I think that might be part of the reason why it doesn't look like there's a lot on the water company side, John, to be honest with you.
Yep.
I just finished a budget meeting with the water director, and we did make a plan to sit down probably next week to start looking at probably further than 10 years, just because of so many changes and potential changes in mandates that may be coming. So I think there's a potential, I think the question is really great, but I think it's farther than 10 years out where we're gonna see it right now, to be honest with you. I think it's farther out than we would normally look with any confidence at the point we're at today. But we do have kind of an understanding of what may be coming, but I think it's difficult with any confidence to really be putting any numbers to it, but we are starting to look at it.
That's very
Sewer,
helpful. Thank you. That's helpful.
sewer, David does do I will say that the sewer director does a very good job of identifying a lot of stuff. He's one of the reasons that you're probably not seeing a lot more than extensions is, as in his capital plan on an annual basis, through what's known as the CMOM program, we're allocating about $2 million a year, which is doing camera work and repair of the line through the sewer lines, either lining or outright replacements. So there's not one line item with a long, like sewer line replacement down, just as an example, Surfside Road, because he's doing a lot of that annual maintenance through the $2 million allocation annually in CMOM. There are an awful lot of sewer extensions that are still being discussed in the CWMP, but those are from the 2014 CWMP, but those are already in there. I think the focus really right now for sewer will really be for the two treatment facilities and and maintaining and upgrading the pump stations, which I think he has included in that in his capital plan. But I will tell you too, I'm in regular contact with David. There's certain regulations that will probably change that plan as well, but I think he has a good handle on the next 10 years. But and one thing I would like to just highlight, with the exception of the sewer extensions, the majority for water and sewer, and I understand that the vast majority of this paid by the same taxpayers, but we do need to remember that the sewer and water are both enterprise funds, so their debt service is 100% financed by the user fees and the rates and charges. So we are cognizant of it when we're talking about capital projects within the general fund, but it is not necessarily doesn't put so much of a squeeze on the general fund, because it is paid for by user fees, so it's not borne. The only portion of either one of those that's typically borne by the taxpayer through a select board policy is the sewer extensions.
Okay, but Brian, one thing we did hear Mark Willett say this year is that he might be asking for like $50 million for a water treatment plant as early as next year.
Well, I don't know if it's next year.
Right.
Yeah, no, Madam Chair, that's a great point. I don't know if it's next year, but that was a topic of the discussion we were in. I don't know how far down the road it is, but he did mention that was potentially a possibility.
But that's not user fees aren't paying for that.
I would say that we have not even modeled how that would be paid for at this point, so
Price of water is going up.
I don't, I'm not gonna commit to a funding for that at this point.
I just had a quick question. I always wondered, how does the town decide, is there a bright line test for new water, drinking water, extensions, because of PFAS? How does it decide if the airport's picking up that project or whether the town does the project?
Well, I think that and I don't want to speak for the airport, I think Art is still on, but I guess I would say that the only piece that the airport, I believe, was responsible for was the extension through Matacasham, I believe. Is that correct, Art?
Yes, the PFAS related portion to provide the water service, because we otherwise had to provide the point of entry filter systems. So it was to replace that.
And then the town, through an SRF and DEP grant, was the one that continued the extension. We called it west of the airport, but that was the town and the water company did that. That was not something that was the airport. I guess if there was anything in that area, I would like to think that the airport commission, select board, and everybody would sit down and figure out how it would be paid for if it needed to be. But that's how that split went for those two water projects that were undertaken by both entities.
Thanks.
we ended up saving a lot of money, didn't we? Because we got the infrastructure money.
Yeah, we ended up with a 2% loan from SRF, and because it was, elimination of PFAS, typically SRF projects do not cover design fees. And, the SRF funding for the water main extension actually did cover all design fees associated. So it covered entirety of the project, which was very helpful.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome. I'll be here just with my camera off if you have any other questions.
101 next September.
Yeah, I think you should come every Thursday, Brian.
I would love to, but I have a
Good answer.
incredible assistant finance director, Sue, who is
Oh,
more than
yeah.
capable of helping and assisting.
No, we're just worried we scared Sue off a little bit, maybe we kept asking her so much stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wouldn't hurt to have one earmarked every year, because I feel like questions do come up,
Yeah.
throughout the process, we're like, oh, maybe, and I mean, not to say that Sue can't answer them, but we never really have a meeting where we focus more on questions kind of to dig into with finance.
Yeah, and not necessarily like on this project.
Exactly, but
you
just
know.
more process
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything kind of else, so.
Go on.
That was very helpful right there, I would say.
We all done? Or am I able to-
You're in
Um,
Did anybody have any other of the individual requests that they wanted to talk about?
and again, because this was kind of to ask any questions that were precluding us from ranking them.
Yeah.
We'll have another chance to ask questions about
Afterwards.
specific requests after we rank them, see where they end up, and then want to discuss.
Yeah.
With a committee, like why mine might be so different from everyone else's, but yeah.
Yeah. Any other ones?
It's funny because mine are more on the
I-
our island home and airport housing and.
Same, those were mine too.
I don't have a specific one, but Brian is still on. Can I ask him one more question?
One mark.
Brian,
You wanna go? Ryan?
is he still on?
I'm
Right.
here.
Yeah, can I ask you just a very general question? And Brian, let me preface by saying I'm the new kid on the block, right? This is my first year at Capcom. But I am feeling some kind of discomfort around the process of how we start this thing off by looking at certain factors and then giving them a relative criteria or something. And then at the start of the process, we all rank them, and then that becomes like a benchmark. And then when we do the RORIs, that's got a whole series of things we should consider. There's parts of it that just feels to me overly complicated, and I'm not sure it's getting us to where we want to be in an aid to decision making. And I'm wondering, this is not about now, Brian, but I'm wondering, like, our off season from, like, whether perhaps you guys could just take a look at it again and see if this makes sense to you to be the way this committee should look at things, or do you have perhaps an alternative option that you might offer that's perhaps simpler and more of a direct line to the decisions we have to make? But
Well, if I could weigh in on that first before Brian does, just because I'm
Okay.
just a member of the committee.
Yeah.
But I didn't really like the Rory system in the beginning either, but I love it now. Because I think it gives you a number to work from, and I like that instead of, I feel this way about the airport, or I feel that way. I mean, I like that we have a number to work from, so it kind of, Brian needs a way to cut it down. I don't think Brian's hoping that we improve every single one of these projects. Are you right? Or that we, not approve, what I mean? Just-
Okay, but
I definitely, I concur with Jill in a lot of ways, John. When I started, the process was kind of haphazard. We would put the list to Capcom and they would have a bunch of discussions, and I think it was a lot of what, more how much somebody liked the project versus the reality of need of a project possibly. But the Rory was designed to kind of be able to have town administration rank the projects that have come before them. and then submit those to Capcom and have them rank them and then kind of review the two rankings, and have discussions about the projects that fall below the median of the that. All of that being said, is there a possibility of making changes and fine tuning it or making some structural changes to it? I think after every year, there's always an opportunity to have those discussions, and I'm sure that probably there's members of the committee right now that would like some changes that we've never had the ability to discuss, because we've always talked about it, but not always done it, because I know you all have downtime after you do your report and everything, but I think I've never found downtime, so to speak, because it seems like it's never a good time, but I'm open to having that discussion to hear your thoughts and everybody's thoughts about the process, and sitting with you and seeing what we can do to facilitate a process that that works. I know that the FinCom relies a great deal on your recommendations, because you spend all of the time listening and talking to the committee member or the department heads and the employees, and going through it and having many times a lot of really good discussion about the project. So I know that the way it is now, I think they have a lot of faith and confidence in the way it is, to the point where they do not want us even considering asking them to put something on that hasn't gone through this and hasn't been discussed, which in the very beginning happened a few times. But I'm happy to sit with you and go through it and hear some of your observations, and we can discuss how we might be able to do it. I think that the Rory has evolved over time, and I'll tell you, I sat through the very first meeting when it was discussed and presented, and my eyes glazed over, and I thought, how in the world are we ever going to do this? But I think it has evolved to a point where it works. Is it perfect? I don't think anything ever is. Can it be changed? I think there are opportunities to change it a little bit. So I'm certainly willing to sit down with you and talk to you about it.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'll in the new year, I'll find it. If you have such a thing as a quiet week, I'll find a spot. Thank
School vacation weeks are really quiet, actually, so
There you go. Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right, are we, sorted to?
I didn't have any more.
You didn't, and Howard, you didn't, okay. I was gonna suggest we not meet next week, that's okay. And then come back the 21st, and then we'll have everything, Sue can pull it. Does that work for you, Sue?
Should we,
She's off. She had to get offline.
should we set a deadline where everyone should have all their Rories done, so then Sue can do her exercise of?
Well, everyone, I think, she doesn't have that many, she's gonna email people,
Right.
and then, yeah, you're right.
I think we all
Why don't
know.
We just tell everyone
Yeah.
that
I think that's good.
I know I have a
we'll
couple.
have them done by Monday, and then she's got a week and a half to.
Yeah.
compile
Okay.
that.
Okay,
So the
Yeah.
14th is gone, right?
Yes.
good.
I
I'm not
have
here.
to go out of town for a work trip.
Do you have any
so-
motions? You're thinking of?
No, not yet. Motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Only if, well, we have the next, I guess that was the next meeting.
So the next meeting is gonna be the 21st. But if we all can do our works by Monday, and I'll just email everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like, but if you wanna go change them based on what we talked about today, it was a
Chickens
pretty
do.
good conversation, and I really appreciate you know, bringing some more concerns. I think it's good. And it's good for Brian to hear, cause
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
gotta take all that forward. So, thank you, and can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Say aye.
Aye.
All right.
You have to turn everything off because Sue's not on, Joe.
Okay. That I can do.